Do you really know the people around you? You believe you can recognize toxicity with sharp word, a controlling gesture, a heavy silence. But what if I told you that the most dangerous people in your life are not the loud ones? That they don't arrive with warning signs, but with charm, with tenderness. Sometimes, they arrive in the form of a parent, a best friend, a lover, or even a spiritual guide. Because the real danger isn't in what's obvious, it's in what's unconscious. In the drama of The Gifted Child, Alice Miller wrote that many of us grew up having to tune ourselves to the unspoken needs of those around us, especially emotionally wounded parents who used us as extensions of themselves. This dynamic doesn't just disappear, it evolves. We learn to survive by becoming what others want, without ever realizing the cost. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who mapped the unconscious mind, believed that most of what governs human behavior is invisible to us. Not because it's hidden, but because we refuse to see. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Yeah. And what happens when other people you loved are deeply unconscious of their pain, their rage, their buried shame? They don't deal with it. They hand it to you. They turn you into the container, the scapegoat, the hero, the enemy, anything but a real person. In The Body Keeps the Score, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk shows how trauma, especially unacknowledged trauma, doesn't just live in the mind, it lives in the body. It shapes how people interpret the world. It turns neutral words into threats, memories into triggers. You can love someone deeply and still be traumatized by the way they see you through their unhealed past. This is the heart of projection. Jung saw it as a natural process, a psychological reflex, but one that becomes dangerous when unconscious. Because when someone cannot hold their own pain, it spills out. And when you are empathic, open, or simply close by, you're the one who absorbs it. Ever felt drained after a conversation you didn't understand? Ever walked away from a relationship wondering if you were the one losing your mind? You may have been dealing with someone whose shadow was trying to make you its home. This is not about blaming others. It's about seeing clearly. We are all capable of projection. We are all capable of unconscious manipulation. But Jung's work, and the work of thinkers like Alice Miller, Gabor Mate, van der Kolk, and even modern writers like Robert Glover, teaches us something radical. The key to reclaiming your power is to know where your feelings end and where someone else's begins. In this video, we will explore the 6 types of emotionally dangerous people. Not because they are evil, but because they are ruled by inner forces they do not understand. For some, this force is repressed anger. For others, it's perfectionism. For some, it's unresolved trauma buried so deep they've built an entire personality around hiding it. But here's the twist. You may recognize someone else, or you may recognize yourself. And that is where real healing begins. So take a breath, watch carefully, because after this, you may never see people or yourself the same way again. Imagine this, you're sitting across from someone you care about. They're sad, again. Angry, again. And somehow, it's your fault. You said the wrong thing. Or didn't say enough. You didn't show up in the way they wanted, even though they never said how. And the worst part is, you start believing it. This is not always gaslighting. Gaslighting is deliberate. This is something more invisible. This is unconscious manipulation, a psychological dynamic where someone unknowingly uses you to feel whole, not because they're evil, but because they're unhealed. Carl Jung warned us, what we do not confront in ourselves, we will meet as fate, but fate often has a face, and sometimes it shares your bed, or your bloodline. In the drama of The Gifted Child, Alice Miller revealed how emotionally immature adults often cast their inner pain onto those closest to them, especially the empathic ones. They do not say, I am hurting. They say, you hurt me. They don't mean to lie. They genuinely believe it. They are not manipulating you consciously. They are projecting wounds they haven't processed. And you become their mirror, their emotional punching bag, their unpaid therapist. In Jungian terms, this is the danger of chronic projection. When someone has not faced their own anger, shame, or helplessness, they find someone to hold it for them. You. You will hear it in their language. You make me feel worthless. You're always abandoning me. Why don't you care about me like you used to? The problem isn't always the words, it's the unspoken emotional contract that you must carry their pain, absorb their mood, prove your loyalty, fix them. But as Robert Glover writes in No More Mr. Nice Guy, when you abandon yourself to meet someone else's needs, you don't build connection, you build resentment. The unconscious manipulator is often soft-spoken, artistic, even broken in ways that make you want to save them. That's the trap. They rarely shout. They don't need to. Because the real weapon isn't aggression, it's guilt. You'll find yourself asking, am I really selfish? Am I cold? Maybe I am too much. You begin to shrink to avoid hurting them, not realizing that their wounds were never yours to begin with. Jung said that when a person is dominated by the unconscious, they no longer see others as people, only as symbols. You stop being you. You become their disappointment, their absent father, their past betrayal, their unreachable ideal. In The Body Keeps the Score, Van der Kolk explains how unprocessed trauma can hijack perception, making someone re-experience old pain in present situations. So no matter what you do, you are always walking into a drama that was written long before you arrived. And if you stay too long, you begin to play your assigned role. The rescuer, the villain, the saint. None of these roles are real. They are projections, but if you're not careful, you'll confuse projection with truth. So how do you protect yourself? You begin by asking a powerful question: is what I'm feeling right now actually mine? If you feel guilt, shame, or sadness around someone, check if it has roots in your story, or if it was handed to you. And once you see it clearly, you must do what Jung called the work of disidentification, stepping out of someone else's narrative, reclaiming your inner ground, and choosing not to carry what was never yours, because unconscious manipulators don't need permission to enter your psyche. They enter through empathy, and empathy without boundaries isn't love, it's self-abandonment. Music deepens slightly. But what happens when the manipulation isn't emotional, but existential? What happens when the person you're dealing with doesn't just project emotions? They live inside a mask, so perfect, so polished, you forget there's even a person behind it. In the next section, we'll explore the figure Jung feared even more than the manipulator, the bearer of the persona. The person who is so identified with their image, they slowly erase everything authentic in themselves and in you. They smile at the right time, they say the right words, they're admired, respected, maybe even envied, but something feels off, not wrong, just hollow. You can't point to a single lie. And yet, it feels like you're speaking to a performance, not a person. This is the bearer of the persona, a psychological archetype Carl Jung described as one of the most seductive and spiritually dangerous forces in modern life, not because they mean harm, but because they are no longer living from within, in the ego and the unconscious. Jung writes, the persona is what someone is not, but what they and others think they are. We all wear masks, we need them. You have to be a teacher in the classroom, a parent at home, a colleague in meetings. But the danger comes when the mask sticks to the face. When someone forgets they are playing a role, and becomes the role. In the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene describes this as the ultimate armor, a carefully crafted image that makes you untouchable, but also unreachable. And eventually, unknowable. The bearer of the persona is polished, charismatic, and almost always admired, but what they've sacrificed is authenticity. They avoid conflict, because conflict reveals truth. They avoid vulnerability, because vulnerability breaks the illusion. They often appear emotionally intelligent, but only in socially acceptable ways. They will mirror your feelings, offer perfect responses, even express empathy. But when you really need raw honesty, they disappear. And here's the deeper cost: living with someone like this begins to make you question your spontaneity. You laugh and wonder if it was appropriate. You cry and suddenly feel ashamed. You bring up something real and they change the subject, or offer a positive spin. This is not overt control. It's emotional sterilization. A silent pressure to be just as composed, just as together. And over time, you start crafting your own mask just to survive in their world. In The Untethered Soul, Michael A. Singer warns of the false self, the mental structure we build to feel safe, validated, in control. But this structure becomes a prison. It filters every experience, every relationship, until even joy is measured, and pain is forbidden. Jung called this the death of individuation, when you become what the world expects, and lose the living, breathing mystery you were meant to be. The bearer of the persona isn't malicious. They're terrified of being rejected, misunderstood, seen. So they polish themselves into something inoffensive, acceptable, perfect. But perfection is lifeless. Behind their eyes is a soul in exile. A person who once felt deeply, but buried it beneath performance. And here's the paradox: the more they silence their truth, the more they expect you to do the same. You laugh too loudly, they flinch. You show too much emotion, they pull away. You speak something raw, they correct it into a motivational quote. In The Myth of Normal, Gabor Mate describes this cultural disease, an addiction to appearing okay. We've learned to value image over integrity, composure over connection, success over soul. But when you live alongside someone lost in their persona, you begin to question your own aliveness. And what happens when that perfectly controlled image finally breaks? Because here's the thing Jung warned us about: the stronger the persona, the darker the shadow. The more someone represses their true emotions, the more violently those emotions return. So, what lies beneath the mask? That's what we'll explore next. The one who denies, avoids, and suppresses their feelings until their shadow rises like a storm. The next archetype is the most unpredictable of all, the owner of the repressed shadow. A person who tries to be good at all costs and ends up causing the most pain. They are calm, polite, measured. They never raise their voice. They never lose control. They are admired for their discipline, their restraint, their spiritual composure. But stay close long enough, and you'll notice something strange: a tension beneath the skin, judgment behind the smile, or rage behind the silence. This is the owner of the repressed shadow. Not the one who throws their darkness onto others, but the one who tries to bury it deep within. Carl Jung called the shadow everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves yet insist on seeing in the world around us. You see, this type doesn't explode not right away. They implode over years. Swallowing shame, swallowing desire, swallowing jealousy, sadness, and need, until they become a spiritual pressure cooker with no release valve. In Aion, Jung warned that the more a person identifies with the light, with morality, perfection, righteousness, the more dangerously they disconnect from their wholeness. And what is repressed does not disappear, it grows teeth in the dark. In The Shadow Effect, the authors describe how even the best intentions become destructive when we deny our humanity. Trying to be good at all costs is not virtue. It's violence turned inward. This person cannot tolerate weakness, not in you, and certainly not in themselves. They are easily offended, quick to judge, and comfortable with mess, with pain, with anything raw. But they'll never say it directly. Their anger comes out sideways, through sarcasm, through withdrawal, through the tightening of control over every little thing. They are not villains. They are, in many ways, victims of their own internal war. Many were raised in environments where being bad meant being unloved, so they amputated half of their emotional body, and now walk through life as only a fraction of themselves. They replaced desire with duty, replaced grief with productivity, replaced authenticity with approval. But as Jung warned, the brighter the persona, the darker the shadow, and eventually, the shadow finds a way out. A cruel word when they're tired, a shaming comment masked as concern, a long-held resentment that explodes over something trivial. You don't see it coming because you think, they're so nice, so spiritual, so emotionally intelligent. But deep inside is a child who was punished for being human, and who now punishes everyone else for reminding them of it. In the body keeps the score, van der Kolk shows us that trauma that is not processed gets stored in the nervous system. The more someone suppresses, the more volatile their body becomes, until even kindness begins to feel like a threat. You're walking through a minefield, but they've buried the mine so well, even they don't know where they are. One wrong step, one emotional outburst, one moment of vulnerability, and boom. The shame bomb goes off, and you become the scapegoat for a lifetime of suppressed emotion. You'll hear phrases like, "How could you say that? You're being inappropriate. Some things just shouldn't be talked about. This isn't about boundaries. It's about control." A subconscious attempt to keep their shadow buried at all costs. But here's the truth Jung taught. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The person who owns their shadow, who faces their rage, their fear, their craving for power becomes whole. But the one who represses it becomes haunted. Living with this person is like being under psychic surveillance. You feel police.filtered.edited. And eventually, you start policing yourself too. You become careful. Too careful. And that's the shadow's final victory. It doesn't just live in them. It takes up space inside you. But repression doesn't exist in isolation. It often wears the mask of morality, of righteousness, of purity. And when that mask becomes a weapon, you're no longer just dealing with a repressed person. You're facing a moral controller, someone who turns your joy into guilt, your freedom into sin, your soul into a target. That's what we'll explore next. Not every executioner carries a sword. Some wield scripture. Others, virtue. Some speak in the name of truth, of integrity, of righteousness. But beneath their certainty lies something darker, a shadow dressed in holy robes. This is the moral controller of the person who uses morality not as a compass, but as a weapon. They don't ask you to grow. They demand that you conform. They don't encourage you to think. They dictate what is right. And when you disobey, you're not just wrong. You're bad. Carl Jung wrote extensively in Aion about the danger of dissociation. When someone identifies so completely with the light, they unconsciously cast all darkness onto others. The brighter the image of the good, Jung warned, the more terrifying the shadow it casts. The moral controller is convinced of their own righteousness, and that conviction makes them blind, blind to their hypocrisy, blind to their projections, blind to their unconscious need to dominate. They don't say, "This is my opinion." They say, "This is the truth." They don't express discomfort. They issue decrees God wouldn't approve. Good people don't do that. You should be ashamed. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung explained that moral fanaticism is not a sign of spiritual maturity, but of spiritual immaturity, a defense mechanism that hides a fragmented inner life behind a fortress of rules. This person isn't grounded in peace. They are obsessed with control. Because if they were to let go even for a moment, they might have to face the chaos within. And so, they try to silence the chaos around them. You feel it when you're around them. You shrink. You edit yourself. You walk on a leash made of invisible shame. They say they care, but you feel smaller each time you're with them. And eventually, you start to wonder, am I broken? Is my freedom wrong? And boundaries, Dr. Henry Cloud warns that those who live with moral controllers often internalize the shame. You stop drawing lines between your truth and their judgments. You begin to self-police, not out of growth, but out of fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of disappointing them. Fear of being seen as impure. And the twisted irony. The moral controller often sees themselves as helping you. It's for your own good. You'll thank me one day. Someone has to tell you the truth, but their truth is not truth. It's trauma wrapped in authority, wounds disguised as wisdom, control masked as care. They are often leaders, parents, religious figures, spiritual influencers, even therapists. But their obsession with your behavior is a mirror of their inability to face their own. Jung wrote, nothing has a stronger influence than the unlived life of a parent. The moral controller has an unlived life. full of unexpressed desires, emotions, contradictions. They silence those parts in themselves and punish you for expressing them freely. They speak of virtue, but what they crave is purity, and purity is a myth. There is no such thing as a flawless human. Only a repressed one. And here's the real tragedy. The more you conform to their ideals, the more you disappear. You become a reflection of their fear, not a manifestation of your truth. And if you dare to challenge them, you'll see the mask drop. Just for a second. And what lies beneath is not holy. It is rage. It is panic. It is shadow. Because the moral controller is not connected to God. They are trying to be God and controlling, judging, condemning all to avoid the one thing they fear most, their own humanity. But sometimes, the danger isn't rooted in dogma. It's not dressed in religion or wrapped in rules. Sometimes, it's simply emotional chaos, a person ruled by inner storms, and resolved trauma. And wild unpredictability. One day they love you, the next they destroy you, and they never understand why. In the next section, we enter the explosive realm of the complex individual. The person whose unhealed past hijacks the present, and whose emotional swings leave you dizzy, confused, and broken. One day, they hold you like a lifeline. The next, they vanish like you never mattered. A simple word becomes a trigger. A joke turns into a fight. And before you know it, you're apologizing for something you never did, trying to calm a storm you didn't create. This is the complex individual, the person not guided by thought, but by trauma, by old pain, by psychological echoes. Carl Jung described complexes as autonomous fragments of the psyche, splinters of the personality that break away from the conscious will. They are like internal landmines, buried deep. Left by early wounds, a mother's abandonment, a father's betrayal, a childhood filled with emotional whiplash. And here's the danger. These fragments don't stay buried. They act, they speak, they possess. You might think you're having a conversation about something small, the text left unanswered, a look you gave, but suddenly, the person in front of you is gone. Replaced by a terrified child, a raging parent, a ghost from their past. In The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk explains that trauma doesn't just change the way we feel. It rewires the way we interpret reality. So when this person explodes at you, they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to a wound, one you can't see, one they've never healed, and you become the battleground. They can be sweet, loving, protective, even addictive in their tenderness. But that's the trap. Because when the shift comes, and it always does, it comes without warning. A sudden accusation. A look of betrayal in their eyes. A cold silence that stretches on for days. You start walking on eggshells, avoiding certain topics, shrinking, censoring, calculating, not because you're weak, but because you're trying to protect the peace. But there is no peace. In Attached, Dr. Amir Levine describes this pattern as emotional unpredictability rooted in attachment wounds. People with unresolved anxiety or trauma become emotionally volatile, switching between connection and punishment, love and withdrawal, warmth and ice, and the deeper you care for them, the more you justify it. They're just hurt. They've been through a lot. I can help. But you can't. Because when a person is ruled by their complex, they are not choosing their behavior. They are reliving it. Jung warned us that unintegrated complexes act like small, autonomous personalities inside the psyche. They override logic. They hijack emotion. They operate like ghosts of the past that won't let the present be real. You say, I love you. They hear, you will leave me. You say, I didn't mean it that way. They hear, you're just like the others. You try to stay, they punish you for not running. And when the chaos settles, they may apologize. They may cry. They may hate themselves. But that is not healing. That is the cycle. And the longer you stay, the more you become infected. You start questioning your memory, your intention, your identity. You begin to wonder, maybe I am unstable, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe this is what love is supposed to feel like, but it isn't love. It's emotional colonization. Because when someone has not healed their complexes, they need someone else to hold the chaos for them. And often, that person is you. This is how the line blurs between who's hurting and who's being hurt. But sometimes, the hurt doesn't come through storms. It doesn't scream or blame or rage. Sometimes, it whispers. It clings softly, smiles sadly, demands nothing and consumes everything. In the final section, we'll explore the psychic vampire, the quietest, most subtle kind of destruction. The one who doesn't yell, but drains you drop by drop until there is nothing left of you to give. They don't yell. They don't fight. They don't even ask for much. But every time you leave their presence, you feel just a little bit smaller. A little more tired. A little less yourself. This is the psychic vampire. Not a monster. Not a manipulator. But someone whose emptiness has become your responsibility. They don't take your energy with violence. They take it with need. With sighs. With vague sadness. With I just need someone to talk to. With I can't do this without you. They are not inherently bad. They are often deeply wounded. But their wounds have become hooks, and you are what's hanging from them. Carl Jung spoke of symbiosis, a psychic state where two people blur into one. Where your boundaries collapse under the weight of someone else's lived life. In The Emotionally Immature Parent, Lindsay Gibson describes how some people never develop the ability to self-soothe, self-regulate, or self-reflect. Instead, they attach themselves to others not out of love, but out of survival. And if you're the kind of person who listens, who feels deeply, who wants to help, you become the perfect host. They don't need your advice. They need your presence. Constantly, and when you try to step away, you are met with sadness, or silence, or subtle shame. They say, I guess you don't care. I didn't want to be a burden. I'll be fine, alone. And so you stay. You answer every message. You make space, even when you have none. You give. And give, and give, until you begin to disappear. In Boundaries, Dr. Henry Cloud warns that enabling this kind of emotional enmeshment doesn't help the other person, it destroys both of you. Because they are not learning to stand. They are learning to lean, and you are slowly collapsing under the weight. It doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like love. It feels like duty. But it's not. It is exhaustion dressed as connection. Sacrifice disguised as intimacy. You begin to feel guilty for needing space. Selfish for wanting silence. Wrong for choosing yourself. But hear this, love does not drain. Love does not guilt. Love does not require your destruction. As Michael A. Singer reminds us in The Untethered Soul, you must let go of the part of you that needs to fix others, in order to remember the part of you that is already whole. The psychic vampire is not a villain. They are someone who refuses to grow and instead feeds off your growth. They cannot face their emptiness, so they fill it with your time, your presence, your light. But you were never meant to be anyone's emotional battery. You were never meant to hold someone else's brokenness like it was your own. The question is not whether they need you. The question is, can they exist without consuming you? And if the answer is no, then love, real love, might look like walking away. Because what Jung teaches us, again and again, is this: until we make the unconscious conscious, we are not choosing our lives. We are being used by them. And this is the truth many people avoid. We all carry pieces of these 6 types. At different times, in different relationships, with different people, you may have projected, performed, repressed, controlled, overreacted, or leaned too hard on someone else's energy. You are not immune. But you are not doomed either. Because once you become aware, truly aware, you begin to reclaim yourself. You begin to choose differently. To see clearly. To respond, not from your past, but from your presence. And that is the beginning of individuation. Not perfection, not purity, but wholeness. So now, I ask you, Which of these patterns have you encountered in your life? And which ones do you recognize within yourself? Your comment might be the beginning of someone else's awakening, and your awareness. That's the crack where the light gets in. You came here hoping to understand someone else. A difficult partner. A confusing parent. A friend who drains you. And maybe you did. Maybe a name, a face, a memory rose to the surface with every word. But now, I ask you something far more terrifying. What if, at some point, you were the one who drained? Who controlled? Who masked? Who projected? This is not about blame. It is about liberation. Carl Jung didn't write about the unconscious to condemn us. He wrote to set us free. Your visions will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Each of these 6 patterns are the manipulator, the persona, the repressed, the controller, the complex, the vampire. They are not just people you meet. They are states you can become. The moment you stop being conscious, stop being curious, stop asking, what am I not seeing in myself, you risk becoming everything you once tried to escape. But if you've watched this far, something in you is awake. Still forming. Still fragile but real. That spark is your power. That spark is your choice. You don't have to repeat the cycles you were raised in. You don't have to carry the projections of others. You don't have to fear the parts of yourself that are wild, wounded, or unfinished. The shadow isn't the enemy. It's the doorway. When you face it, name it, integrate it, you stop being a puppet of your past and begin becoming a whole human being. So breathe. Take one step inward. And know awareness is the beginning of everything. This isn't the end of a video. It's the beginning of a deeper journey. If you're ready to keep going, click into the next video. We'll go there together.